Oh, Mike, I can't believe you're so blind you can't see it. This book ripped off Wheel of Time. I mean, it even has a fade in it. Guess you guys never heard of a Nazgul, huh? Hey, what's up, bookworms and Dralade? We are back today to talk an independent release for the first time on the channel. First, a fully 100% self-published book I've ever reviewed on the channel, guys. And there's going to be two of them. We're going to be talking about The Fall and The Bound and the Broken, book number 1. This is A Blood and Fire, the first book and the first novella for the world of The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill. Now, guys, with this, I had heard about this a lot. I had been hearing about the series a lot the last year plus. I think towards the end of last year was when I really started to hear it a lot more from outside of just, the self-pub circles on Twitter and things like that. I started hearing about it, started seeing it flash on Amazon, because you like this, you might like this, getting it recommended on Goodreads. And then, of course, several of my peers in the BookTube community were saying, Mike, of all the things you like, we think that you're going to like this a lot. And you know what? You guys were right, because I have liked everything that I've read by Mr. Cahill so far. And we're here to talk about it today, guys. Now, what I want to talk about this is I got to answer the question, well, where should I start? Should I start with The Fall, which is a prequel novella? Should I start with Blood and Fire, book number 1, as it was originally intended? Now, Ryan himself has said it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter really which way. Actually, he has an introduction at the beginning of The Fall telling you that there are two ways to read this, and your experience is going to kind of vary depending on that. Now, with me, I read The Fall first. But what I'm going to kind of talk about today, guys, I'm just going to kind of review both these, and then at the end, I'll answer that question of which one I think that you should read first. But guys, if you don't know about the series and you don't know what it is about, well, let's get into it here. The Order have watched over the continent of Epheria for thousands of years. But there are those who believe the Order has had its day, that it is corrupt, indulgent, and deceitful, and that it is ready to fall. The city is on fire, dragons fill the skies, and traitors fill the streets. The fall has begun. 400 years later, Epheria is a land divided by war and mistrust. The High Lords of the South squabble and fight, only to be kept in check by the Dragon Guard, traitors of a time long past, who served the Empire of the North. In the remote villages of southern Epheria, still reeling from the tragic loss of his brother, Caitlin Breyer prepares for the proving, a test of courage and skill that not all survive. But when 3 strangers arrive in the village of Milltown with a secret they are willing to die for, Caitlin's world is ripped from under him, and he is thrust headfirst into a war that has been raging for centuries. There is no prophecy, and his coming was not foretold. He bleeds like any other man, and bleed he will. Guys, this takes us back to 2001. This is The Fall and Of Blood and Fire. Guys, it's a series I'm very excited to talk about because, well, as you're going to see when we talk about who makes it good or bad, there is a lot of good things here to talk about. First, I gotta say, look, this is epic, traditional fantasy, kind of told through a modern lens. Something that I think most of us grew up reading, the Tolkiens, the Wheel of Times, the Shannara's, things like that, the Chronicles of Narnia, all the traditional fantasy in the world. But you'd always felt like, okay, but it's kind of fairy tale-ish. I never really feel like my characters are in danger. I never feel like they're reacting like real people would. So I feel like with this is he's remembering all those themes that probably brought Ryan to this genre as a writer. What brought him as a fan? What brought us all to it as a fan? And he's saying, let's kind of give it a modern twist. Let's kind of deal with the way that, real people would handle these situations, the real way that real people would talk to each other. And, it doesn't have to necessarily be, grimdark to be realistic. You can have your clear-cut good guys and your bad guys. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think tropes are a problem. We'll talk about those as this goes on here. But he gives it that modern spin that I think modern audiences are going to really appreciate, in that it never really feels like, okay, this is great, but I feel like I've seen this all before. It feels very archaic. I feel it feels very formulaic. You never really get that feeling with it. And I think that's what makes this world just feel so real. Yes, it's familiar. There's a Dark Lord. There's prophecies. There's chosen ones. There's things like that. There's dragons, guys. These are things I think that aren't a secret to the fantasy genre. But he never once makes it feel like, hey, I'm reinventing the wheel by talking about this stuff. He's giving a hat nod, and he's kind of giving his own spin on these things. And I find that actually quite fun, because it feels familiar, yet it still feels very, very fresh. And I think that's something that a lot of writers could actually pull off, because I just feel like you're just being quite derivative of things I've already read. No, you can see obviously some things that influenced him here, but I never really feel like, okay, this is just a straight carbon copy of something I've already read before. But again, he doesn't shy away from those things. That T word that everybody seems to hate these days, which is trope. For me, trope's what brought me to this genre, guys. So I'm fine with seeing those things, those big ones I just kind of mentioned there. I love a good farm boy leaves home story. It never really bothers me. Dragons are what brought me to this genre in the first place. And there are all these things in spades. He never shies away from that. And personally, I'm a fan of it. If you like a Faithful and the Falling type story, I think you're going to be right at home here. I think he gives it a modern spin in that it's far from predictable. It avoids a lot of those tropes in that you'll see things you'll be like, okay, there are those tropes there, but they're never done the way that you're expecting them to. And I don't think he just subverts expectations just to subvert them. I never think he's doing that. He's never just trying to outsmart the reader. I'm just saying you're not always going to be, saw that coming, 30 pages ago. I think this first book probably surprised me at least a dozen times, and the fall is even better with it. Guys, the fall is just completely so original. That's the thing about it I'm tipping my hand. I'll talk about that when I get to the bottom of this here. But again, guys, dragons. I never get tired of dragons, and Ryan has lots of dragons to talk about in this series. And I think if you are a fan of dragons, and again, I don't think you'd be subscribed to this channel if you really don't care for dragons. I think that you'll be happy here. But it's just how epic in scope this series is. If you start with the fall, you're going to see, holy hell, if they were trying to adapt this for like TV or the big screen, it's unfilmable. There's no way they could do this. It's just so grand in scale. It's so large and in your face. It's like the most epic moments of the dragons in Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire. It really is just that big. And it's hard to kind of express how he's able to get that across in that 90-page novella, but he does it. He does it really, really well. But I think that the magic is something I got to talk about here, because I think it's something that's very well done. I have very much become a soft magic person. I think when magic is the main character in your books, it started to be a drag for me. Look, I love Brandon Sanderson as much as everybody else, but sometimes I'm like, I wish he'd spend a little less time on the magic, explaining how the magic works to me, spending a little bit more time on what makes his characters tick. That's something that's kind of, I've felt like I wish that Sanderson would focus on that more here. With this, I feel like, okay, it has a fine balance between that. And the magic is very important. There is a magic system here. I just don't think you dwell on it so much that you're like exhausted by hearing about it. Personally, I don't need to know how the sausage is made. I grew up reading Lord of the Rings. Do you know why Gandalf can do magic? Because he's a fucking wizard. That's why he can do magic. I don't need to know how people can do magic. And that's something with modern fantasy. I mentioned Brandon Sanderson by name because he's the most prevalent with it, and he has the best magic systems, without a doubt. I'm not taking away from that. But what I'm saying is I don't need to understand how it works for me to enjoy a magic system. And this, he's got a very, very cool magic system. It doesn't seem quite as restrictive, I think, as some other fantasy series will do with their magic. It isn't like, hey, you know what? Hey, I woke up one day and decided, you know what? I'm going to be a magic user. I'm not saying it's like that. I'm saying it seems like it's a little bit more widely used than some series where it's like, oh, this person's special just because they can do magic. So the spark is a neat idea. But what the spark is able to do with five different branches of magic, and then you get to use a soul blade, which is, again, why do we keep making the Sanderson reference here? Imagine a shard blade from Stormlight Archive. I'm getting my series mixed up here. From Stormlight Archive. He does something like that, but somehow it's even cooler. And I love a shard blade, guys. It's really, really cool. The soul blades in this are just excellent, excellent stuff. When I was reading The Fall, I wasn't probably 30 pages into it before we saw our first soul blade. And I was like, holy hell, I am in. I am totally in on this magic system. So it's something refreshing for me, someone who'd gotten tired of magic systems. I feel like he's brought something kind of refreshing here, that you don't need a PhD to understand the magic system. That's great. But I will say, guys, through the end of A Blood and Fire, you still got questions about how this magic system works. And personally, I'm okay with that. I don't need to know how it works. But you might be if you're one of those who needs to understand the science of the magic. And he might get to that in later books. Don't know. We're just talking about books 1 and the novella right now. But guys, character development is a big one for me. You guys know, if you watched my Lonesome Dove review recently, you understand how important developing your characters is for me. And Ryan does a good job of that here. And you will see a lot of people, one of the criticisms you'll see is that, oh, well, the beginning is very, very slow. For me, if you grew up reading Lord of the Rings, you grew up reading Shannara, you read like Inheritance Cycle, something like that, it works like that. That's how traditional fantasy sets up. They set up the characters and their everyday life the first third of the book. get you connected to those characters. So when everything inevitably, presumably, and knowingly always comes to predictable chaos, you're ready for it, and you feel for those characters. You feel bad for them, seeing everything that just got taken away from them. I know with a lot of modern fantasy, it's like you got to be pop you in the face on page 1 or else you will lose people. With me, this, I got the same complaint when I was reading Malice by John Gwynne. People saying, oh, you got to be careful. First, 100 pages are really slow. And I read it, I was like, this is just like every other traditional fantasy book I've ever read. I don't think this is slow. But again, I think it's just going to kind of, your mileage is going to vary on that one. So for me, I thought it was great because it connected you with Kaylin and Dan and Rist right away. It got you understanding what these characters are like, what their friendship was like, what their familial deal was like. It got you to know about his relationship with Ella. It got you to know about Kaylin's history with his brother. It got you to know about Ella's relationship with Rhett and how that has kind of strained the relationship with their father. So these are things that all sets up before the action even happens. Personally, I love that. I love them developing characters and getting me to know their in and outs of their everyday life. I want to know the intricacies of what's going on in this village before I'm going to give a damn before it inevitably ends up in fire. I don't think that's a spoiler to tell you guys. That's what things happen to all these traditional fantasies. Why does Farm Boy have to leave home? It's either Farm Boy leaves home or Stranger comes to town. You know what? This one does both of those things. And I personally, I'm okay with it. So I find his prose quite good. I never found myself in one place saying, no person would actually say that. I feel like the dialogue's very snappy. I think he does a lot of banter between the three boys very well. It's very realistic. That is the way that teenage boys talk to one another. So I think that's pretty good. I've never been a prose snob, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, this purple prose is so amazing. Look, I think for a debut, it's quite great. I didn't see any moments where I was like, oh, that sentence didn't really land for me. But again, I'm not the professor when it comes to all things, prose and narrative and things like that. Look, I think it's fine. They're very accessible. I feel like he uses the $10 words when he doesn't need to use a $20 word. I think that's fine for me. But if you're looking for that straight connoisseur of the thesaurus, I don't know if this is going to be the book that you're looking for. But you're just looking for accessible and you understand and you don't ever feel like, hey, no characters talk like this. I think you'll be quite happy with it. I think that the large cast is a good thing. I know they can be quite confusing, and I think that's a lot of epic fantasy. There's so many characters, there's so many lands, there's so many histories and family trees you got to go through. Look, Song of Ice and Fire is maybe my favorite fantasy series of all time. So I don't feel like any series can ever throw as many characters and histories and family trees at me as that one did. So it doesn't bother me. It might be tough if you're a newbie to fantasy, but I always just tell you is people like Ryan, they're good enough writers that they're going to, if the character's important, they're going to make it, you're going to understand that through reading. Over time, you're going to see that character's name again and again and again. You're going to finally it's all going to sink into place. But, I always say, guys, don't feel bad about taking notes. There's nothing wrong with taking notes when you first start a book. Because for me, if I'm having a hard time with the large cast, I'll write the names down because as soon as I write it down, I remember who they are. But what I love about a large cast is it makes the world feel more real. I mean, they were dealing with a whole community here at the beginning. I want to feel like, okay, this person's the blacksmith, this person's the cook, this person does that. I love that. Again, I think back to Salem's Lot by Stephen King. That felt like a living, breathing town because the cast was so large. And that's what I like about what he's doing here. It sets up that village for the oncoming catastrophe, and you like it. You like it a lot. And you can't like a book like this without a great villain, I think. And I think you do. Look, you have Fane Mortem, who is like, the looming presence, the Dark Lord in the background, but you don't really see, but you do get to see Jusukar Farda, who is an amazingly intricate character. I want to know so much more about this character, and it's one of those things like, well, do you want like a redemption? No, I'm not saying I want a redemption arc because the character does some awful things in this first book. I'm just saying that I think your book can only be as interesting as your best villain, and I think that he's a very, very layered one that I'm interested in peeling those layers back and finding out more about. Also, guys, I am an easy sell when it comes to animal companions. I'm reading old Legend of Driss right now, and Guinevere's got me right back on that. I need a good animal companion in my fantasy kind of mode, and he's got a couple of good ones here. I'm not going to tell you what they are. I mean, obviously, I think you know what these books are about. You know that one of them's probably going to be a dragon. But let's just say Valeris and Fainer are two amazing animal companions that I cannot wait to see how they develop over the course of the series. And they must be protected. Don't you do it, Ryan. Don't you do it. That's something I always will say. Hey, look, kill off all of my favorite human characters, but leave the animals alone. But I love how much he's able to build history and lore off of such, not really that long of a book. I mean, I feel like this first book is just average fantasy novel length. But the thing is he builds up such incredible history in just this novella, which is incredible he's able to do that. So I think that the guy actually has his world really plotted out well before you even really get going. So when you do leave that small town, the world does feel massive. It really, really does, because you're experiencing it from Kalen's eyes. And that's a good thing. I think it really just makes that world, like I said, feel bigger, feel like it just has a lot of wonder to it. And I feel like he's not trying to force so much world building on you at once that you become overwhelmed. But guys, no book is perfect, right? There's lots of things I think that you could probably nitpick about this book, and we're going to kind of talk about those. Some may find it a little too derivative at times, like I did mention. You're going to see lots of people say this feels very familiar with things they've already read. Wheel of Time, Shannara, Inheritance Cycle seem to be the biggest ones. But look, for me, guys, all those series that I just mentioned right there, they all borrowed from J.R.R. Tolkien. So it's never really a problem for me. I've noticed that Wheel of Time fans get really, really touchy about this stuff. They get really, really gatekeepy. Is that the word I want to use? They get really, really protective if anything was in Wheel of Time and anything else uses something from it. And I'm always like, guys, do you want me to talk about all the stuff that Robert Jordan borrowed from Frank Herbert's Dune and J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings? Because I can do that. It would just be a totally longer video. I think that the big complaint about Eye of the World was that it ripped off Fellowship of the Ring and Dune a little too much, right? Some people say that this book's got 3 male leads and it has, it has fades and it has a wizard and things like that. Like, you're just describing Lord of the Rings. You're not describing Wheel of Time, you guys. So look, for me, these are things that are just in traditional fantasy. It doesn't bother me at all. I think, again, I don't feel like he's ever going beat by beat with the story. I mean, go back and read Shannara, guys. The first Shannara book, it is just Fellowship of the Ring with the names replaced. I never feel like this is that. But again, when you're dealing with traditional fantasy, there's going to be lots of things. You get this with Michael J. Sullivan, too. A lot of things you're like, this feels very familiar. But I think he does it in a way that's fresh, so I never really feel like it is a ripoff of anything. But yeah, sure. I feel like maybe Ryan was one of those people who was trying to grab those readers who read Aragon when they were younger and said, hey, those people are grown up now. I think this might be something that they would be interested in. Or, hey, we all love Lord of the Rings. Let's tip the hat to that. I never feel like, again, that this is a story that I've read before, because the story, the narrative is actually quite original. It's just you're going to see little things that make you think back to some of those fantasy series. But guys, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of fantasy series that do that. So, again, maybe it's just the experience that I'm having, but I never had a problem of feeling like, oh, God, he's got three male leads. This is just a Lord of the Rings or a Wheel of Time ripoff. I never felt like that. And like I said, a lot of modern fantasy readers who need, something exploding every couple pages, you might find the beginning a little slow if that isn't the format that you are used to. But as far as a debut goes, guys, this is about as good as it could get for me, as getting me involved in a new fantasy world. But what about you guys? Why should you read it? Well, look, if you love traditional fantasy and you feel like you needed a breath of fresh air kind of infused into it, I think that this is going to give you what you needed. For me, this is something I'd been looking for since I finished The Faithful and the Fallen, where it feels like traditional fantasy, but with its own fresh ideas. And I feel like he does that and takes it a little bit higher. Because, guys, this is more, I would say, a little more adult than Faithful and the Fallen was. Not that I think that Faithful and the Fallen was PG or anything, but I feel like this is definitely a step above. It does have bad language. There's a lot of bad language in here, and that's a good thing for me. But I think, again, you never really have to go to the grimdark levels. He has clear-cut good guys and bad guys. He's not explaining to you about what all is coming out of people's bodies and things like that when they're sliced up. But it is very adult. And I have to bring that up because people just seem to not understand that if it's an adult fantasy book, that might have bad language in it. And I'm not saying you have to have bad language to have an adult fantasy book. I'm just saying I don't think you should be surprised when it is there. But again, there are stakes, characters die, and things like that. But I never get to the point where this just feels grim and hopeless. So if you're looking for adult, but not quite on a point where it's just nihilism, you're just going to feel bad, I think this will be just what you're looking for. And I don't think there's a problem with knowing who the good guys are in a story like this. It's clearly obvious. Okay, we're not killing innocent people. We're the good guys. Yeah, that's very, very clear to see. So the big question, guys, should I read The Fall first, or should I read A Blood and Fire first? Now, look, I read The Fall first for one reason. I read it because it was 90 pages, it was low commitment, And a lot of people had told me that they felt like it was a better representation of what the series would become. And I said, sure, I can do that. And also, guys, look, the fall was free. You could get the fall for free. Go to Ryan's website, subscribe to his email newsletter, and he will send you a digital copy of the fall for free. There's your teaser. A good reason why I think you should read it first. For me, I think that you should read the fall first for one reason. It shows you what this world will become. Because you will read A Blood and Fire, and you'll think, it's right there on the cusp of something big happening, but nothing quite to the levels of what happens in the fall. And that just showed me, okay, I can see where this series is going to build to, and it's going to be absolutely amazing. So you were dropped into you're just really just thrown right into the fire, literally, in the fall. It starts right when everything pops off. And you don't know who any of these people are. You don't know why they're fighting. You don't know where they are. All you know is, oh my God, there's amazing magic. There's all this betrayal and backstabbing. There's dragons fighting each other. It's just epic madness, and I loved it. And I think it's a great place to start because it shows you this is what the series is going to become. Because when you're reading A Blood and Fire, you'll see there is one character who's kind of telling this in like a story about the fall, just real briefly. And you're like, that sounds very interesting. But I feel like you can go into it with a knowing smile of knowing, I know the whole history. Because you think over 400 years, some things are going to kind of get changed. Some things are going to be written by the winners and things like that. You get to know the whole history. You kind of got that knowing smile when the characters are referencing the fall that you know these things. So Ryan says in the beginning of the fall that you can do either way. For me, I will recommend that you do the fall first because one, look, it's an easy sell. Like I said, 90 pages isn't a big commitment. You can get it for free and check it out and see if the series is going to be for you. But I think it's going to be. I don't really see how you could read the fall and not at least be intrigued enough to be like, well, I could definitely take some more of that. But guys, as for my final thoughts on this book, look, this was recommended to me for, like I said, from a lot of the fellow booktubers who really just know what I'm into, and they were right. This book was absolutely great, just what I've been looking for. Like I said, I've had that Faithful in the Fallen-sized hole in my heart since I finished that series. I love that because I felt like it was just the right spin of traditional fantasy and modern fantasy. This, I feel like, is on its way to being as good, if not better. And Faithful in the Fallen was a top 10 fantasy series for me. So I'm very excited about where it's headed. I think once I finish this, the most current book, I'll start being one of those people who just bugs Ryan about, hey, why aren't you writing faster? And it's not fair because this guy writes incredibly, incredibly fast. I think with this series the first book came out in 2021. He's put out 3 books, and he's just about to put out a 3rd novella in that time period. And guys, his 3rd book is bigger than A Storm of Swords. It's amazing how fast this guy writes, and it doesn't seem to be lacking in any quality, as everyone says, that each book does get better than the last. Now, here's a little teaser for you guys. I've already read book number 2, and yeah, it's better than book number 1, and I liked book 1 a lot. So I think this is a series that has a chance to be one of the all-timers for me by the time it is said and done. And I'm very excited that more people are starting to pick it up. Don't let the whole thing about a self-pub author scare you off. Look, this guy is writer, director, producer, but he's not lacking quality at all. I think that everything about the series is what fantasy fans do love. So if you just love the fantasy genre, you don't feel like anything needs to be changed from what it once was, but hey, maybe you want the characters to act a little more modern, I think that you're going to have a great time with this. It's going to be just what you're looking for. And if you don't go into it with your arms crossed saying, oh, this is just a rip-off of something I already love, I think you're going to have a great time with this. So guys, I hope you will pick it up. I'm going to drop the links down below if you want to pick these up. Like I said, subscribe to his newsletter, get the fall on your digital reading device for free, and you can get a kind of a preview of what this series is like. And guys, it is going to slap. You're going to love it. So drop in the comments, guys. Let me know Bound and the Broken, book 1. Hey, are you current with it? Whatever. Let me know down below what you guys think about it. And make sure you watch tomorrow because I will be talking to Ryan Cahill on the channel tomorrow in a full live discussion. So you guys want to ask him any questions, you can do that. It's going to be spoiler free. So if you haven't read the series yet, that's fine. You just get to listen to his awesome Irish accent and hear him talk about love of fantasy and what it takes to make it as a fully independent author. I can't wait to talk to him about these things. So guys, let me know what you think about Of Blood and Fire and or The Fall, and I will talk to you there.